still don't know. I don't know. I've had an election in between. I just forget everything.
Yeah, all right.
I do.
Okay.
I just
It's not just
No, it's not just. Order, order. The Speaker's Commission on Digital Democracy recently recommended the use of regular digital public discussion forums to inform debates held in Westminster Hall. A digital debate has taken place on Twitter ahead of today's debate on access to drugs for ultra-rare diseases. For this reason, Mr. Speaker has agreed that for this debate, members of the public can use handheld electronic devices in the public gallery. Photos, however, must not be taken. May I encourage members who wish to refer to the Twitter debate to call it the Rare Diseases Twitter debate rather than using people's individual Twitter names. I call Greg Mulholland to move the motion.
I move the motion, and I'm delighted to be able to have the chance to speak on this important topic today. And I was also delighted to lead and take part in that historic Twitter debate yesterday, which I think was a great success. And on top of the very strong show of support from members across the House, I think the fact that nearly 1 million people took part in that yesterday, when I saw the figures, shows what an important issue that is. Now, the reason I got involved with this particular issue is that the parents of Sam Brown, a 6-year-old boy in my constituency, his parents, Katie and Simon, came to see me. Because in 2009, when Sam was just 16 months old, he was diagnosed with Morquio syndrome, an ultra-rare disease which just 88 people in the United Kingdom have. It's a degenerative, life-limiting condition with typical life expectancy of around 25 years, but has considerable limiting effects on what those suffering from it can do and their deterioration during that time. I think all of us here can only imagine what it must feel like as a parent to receive the devastating news that your child will deteriorate before your eyes and will not live to an old age and may not even see much, if any, of their adulthood. And then imagine how you will feel when a nurse rings you up and says, there might be a treatment, but it's only a trial. Well, of course, on hearing that news, what parent wouldn't want to sign up for that trial for the drug Vimizim, supplied by the drug company Biomarin? And that's exactly what Katie and Simon did, and signed up Sam to the trial without hesitating. So over the last 3 years, Sam has been doing a 100-mile trip from Otley to Manchester every Thursday to get Vimizim, his enzyme replacement therapy. Without this, Sam would see his growth stunted more than it has already been, further skeletal deformities and possible heart and vision problems. But with Vimizim, Sam's parents, and even more importantly, Sam's medical team will say that he is clearly physically more capable, stronger, and has more stamina than he has ever had. To quote Katie, his mother, the drug has given him the freedom to be a child again. Can I ask honourable and right honourable members to take the opportunity to look at and to share the single produced by the Keep Sam Smiling campaign, There is a Boy, produced at his primary school, the Whartons in Otley, where they have shown huge support to this ordinary little lad who wants to be an ordinary boy and wants to be an ordinary man. The video for the single shows Sam being a fireman, being a doctor, being an astronaut, the kind of things that he has the right to hope one day to be. But he can only have that hope if he gets treatment. He can only have and be allowed to have hope if he carries on being able to take Vimizim. And we're here today because after 3.5 years, in just 9 days, Sam's access to Vimizim looks all but set to be cut off. Of course I'll give way.
I'm very grateful to the honourable member
and he knows that I represent the grandmother of this particular boy, Sam Brown. And this is a very important debate. And as he said, the mother has already testified to how he is stronger and fitter as a result of taking this disease, this medication. And NICE has said it is likely to provide valuable clinical benefits for certain aspects of the condition. How can it be then, even if it doesn't provide a full cure, that it looks like there's an axe of this particular treatment for this wonderful young boy?
Well, I thank the Honourable Gentleman for giving way, and I think it is a very strange recommendation from NICE, and I will come on to that when clearly this is a drug that is effective. But Sam is not the only person being let down here, and indeed it isn't only people, children, adults with Morquio disease that are being let down. There are a number of other conditions, and I've been also working particularly with members and organisations with regards to the mutation of Duchenne muscular dystrophy and with tuberous sclerosis. And that is why together we have come together to campaign as one to say that we need a better way of approving drugs for ultra-rare conditions, because at the moment we have a system in this country where people with ultra-rare diseases are discriminated against, and that must stop. I will give way.
Number of gentlemen giving way, and also I pay tribute to the work that he has done on this and the way he has brought about this debate. When he talks about other rare conditions, I've got a very sick young 2-year-old in my constituency suffering from neuroblastoma, a rare form of cancer which only 100 children suffer from each year. What is so difficult to accept is that she has to travel to the United States and raise money to go there to get the treatment. We should be ensuring that children or anyone suffering from those rare conditions, like Ruby Young or those in his constituency, get the treatment they need at the first point of call in their own country.
I thank the Honourable Gentleman for giving way, and he's right, and there are a number of conditions, and I will not be able to mention them all today, and other members may wish to do so. I will particularly concentrate on the 3 conditions that I have been working on, which is Morquio, Duchenne and tuberous sclerosis. And with those 3 conditions, there are about 180 people who are suffering from those conditions. And all of those people and their families, I'm sorry to say, have been hugely let down by the repeated failure of process by NHS England and the thick wall of bureaucracy and the utter lack of accountability that there currently is with this process. I will give way.
Thank you for giving way, and I, like him, have been involved of the issue of Morquio, and is he struck by the correspondence that we've had, which seems to just want to blame the company, or the company goes back and say, well, we haven't had this information. And yet the real people that are suffering are the patients out there, and this has been drawn out to the point, and then we also have the news now, which is obviously what NICE is saying.
Greg Mulholland.
Well, I thank the Honourable Gentleman for his intervention, and it's been a pleasure working with him and others, and we must all continue to do so. And that leads me on to what has been a fiasco in terms of this decision-making process. And the leadership of NHS England should hang their head in shame over the way that they have handled this. But there is also a responsibility on the shoulders of the Minister, who I know cares about this, but he needs to really get a grip of NHS England and the way that they have failed these families. Because, of course, part of this goes back to the passing of the Health and Social Care Act in 2012, which led to the disbanding of the advisory group on national specialised services in April 2013. That was the expert body that previously advised on specialist treatments and services, and it was a body that was respected by many rare disease charities. I will give way.
And I congratulate him. In relation to, for example, muscular dystrophy, again, there was treatments in Europe, but in this country it's suddenly been halted. And I hope the Minister can give us a good answer to that, because whilst there are delays in these things, people are suffering. And in some instances, because it could shorten their lives.
I thank the Honourable Gentleman for giving way, and I hope we do indeed get answers today, but also a real promise of intervention from the Minister. But in terms of the process, I will give way.
Can I thank the Honourable Gentleman for giving way and pay tribute to the work that he's done on this, and he knows that I joined this campaign because of Archie Hill, the constituent age 10 who has Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. Would he agree with me that no matter what the Minister says, that when we come to talk about drugs such as Translana and the process that he is about to outline, which I think has also been disgraceful, that what is going to be very difficult is the fact that this drug is available in other European countries. Yeah. So no matter what is said, this drug is actually available in other countries, and we are looking at it here and have still not cleared it for our patients in the UK.
Greg Mulholland.
Indeed, it's been a pleasure also to meet her constituent Archie and his parents, and these are the young people that are inspiring us to campaign. She's absolutely right. We are debating the EU referendum bill today, and yet other EU and some non-EU countries regard these treatments as effective and affordable, and yet somehow we don't. So to fast forward from the scrapping of the previous body to October 2014, NHS England came out with the scorecard system. And that's despite one of the clinicians involved, Dr. Chris Hendricks, saying on the 22nd of October in an email, I would suggest the scoring is not used at all for decision-making at this round, and I would rather have people acknowledging that they are making random decisions than to try and give some credibility to a process that was deeply flawed. That's one of the senior clinicians. Nonetheless, NHS England went ahead with the scorecard system to decide which funding should be prioritised. And then on the 28th of November, seeing that clearly this was not only haphazard but also discriminatory, Suzanne Maller and her 10-year-old boy Kamal, another inspiring young person who I've been delighted to meet, who has Morchio, with the help of the MPS Society, threatened legal action against NHS England on the basis that the scorecard was clearly discriminatory, that there was no policy explaining it, and that there had been no public consultation over its use. Just 1 week after that, on the 2nd of December, NHS England announced that they were suspending the scorecard use because clearly MPS Society and Kamal were right and they were wrong. I will give way to the honourable gentleman.
Very good case. It's good to pray before you, Mr Crosby. But isn't the case all the way through this that the voice of clinicians is not being listened to? In the same way as it wasn't listened when this Health and Reform Act went through, which led us to where we are now, because the voice of clinicians was being listened to very, very clearly. I've been the chairman of the APPG on muscular dystrophy for 10 years in here. We had a very good working relationship with the specialised commissioning groups who were effective in getting medication of this type to people, but the bureaucracy that was created by the Act, which was against the wishes of clinicians, is why we are here today. NHS England has got a lot to answer for, but it was the government's decision to ignore the voice of professionals that's got us into this position.
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his intervention. It's been a pleasure to work with him and the APPG on muscular dystrophy on the Translana part of the campaign. But he's absolutely right, and I think one of the things we want to hear from the Minister is an acknowledgement that the current processes are not fit for purpose and not fair on those with ultra-rare diseases. And I hope that we will see a real drive to have an overhaul of that process from the Minister today. I will give way.
The honourable gentleman on securing this debate. And does he think that probably one of the best ways forward to help people who are suffering would be to agree with what Muscular Dystrophy UK have said and ask for an introduction of the fund that ring-fences money for these rare diseases?
I think that's a very powerful suggestion, such as also the suggestion of looking at the tariffs that drug companies are expected to pay, and with the surplus there, that could form part of a fund, but there certainly needs to be an overhaul. So, I will give way. I'm conscious that I haven't even got through the process yet. But
I'm sure we're all extremely grateful, Mr Crosby, to the honourable gentleman for giving way, and he's been very generous. And like him, I was at Downing Street last week supporting my constituent Harry Barnley, who is suffering from Duchenne muscular dystrophy. I also have the headquarters of the Batten Disease Family Association in Farnborough, my constituency. And he just mentioned rare disease. The Honourable Lady referred to some ring fencing. Part of the problem is that these are very, very small number of cases, and they are very expensive to deal with. And I'm just wondering whether we should either ring fence some funding or perhaps have a surcharge, maybe on prescription charges, which the public generally pays. And that's so, Judge, so that the funding issue was taken out of it, because there are two issues. One is the clinical issue, but the other is the funding. And if we remove the funding issue, we could then concentrate on the clinical issue.
Holland.
Well, I thank the gentleman for his contribution, and I'm sure those are some of the things that the Minister will now want to consider in a drive to get an appropriate system for this. I'm keen to get through the process. So from the 2nd of December, when NHS England suspended the use of the scorecard, there was a meeting on the 15th of December of the NHS England Clinical Priorities Advisory Group. But after the suspension of the scorecard system, that meeting was called off. That's when we started campaigning and calling for an interim process whilst they went back to the drawing board. NHS England refused to do that, and I'm sorry to say left all these families in the dark, having no idea what would happen next or in what timescale. They then launched a consultation on the 27th of January with a new process for deciding which drugs to fund, and that closed on the 27th of April. We still haven't heard the decision. We are expecting, or we have been told that there may be a decision on the 25th of June, though that has not been confirmed in writing, and I hope the Minister can give us confirmation on that today. But that's also linked to, clearly linked to the recent NICE recommendation, certainly when it comes to Vimizim, even though we were told very clearly by NHS England that their decision on the 25th of June would not be dependent on NICE, and yet now they are saying because NICE have, in the short term, said that they will not approve Vimizim, that NHS England will not either. The whole thing is a fiasco and an embarrassment. And I have to say to the Minister, and I understand his arguments that he makes to say that, well, we can't have political interference, but in the end, as the Secretary of State for Health made clear to me on the Public Administration Select Committee when he appeared before us in the last Parliament, he accepts that the buck stops with him, and when things are wrong, when bureaucrats are failing, in the end it comes to his desk and the Life Sciences Minister's desk, and I urge him now to take that up. So going back to the three conditions, which I will briefly touch on, and particularly starting with Vimizim, I wish to pay tribute to the MPS Society for their amazing campaigning, particularly to the Chief Executive, Christine Lavery, whose son Simon had Morchio and died in 1982, aged just 7 years old. Her passion and her colleagues' passion is something that, again, is inspiring me and others, and we will continue to work with you. But Vimizim, which is the enzyme replacement therapy produced by Biomarin, is currently being supplied on a free trial by Biomarin to 34 patients around the country, 34 out of 88. So more of those with Morchio are not getting it than are. The list price for Vimizim is $395,000 per person per year. But in October, Biomarin proposed a fixed-term arrangement with NHS England to supply the drug at a lower price for a number of years. After Biomarin's offer in October, NHS England did not even reply, despite repeated follow-ups, leading to Biomarin being forced to announce in February that they would cease to supply the drug after the 11th of May, a date at which then was extended to the 25th of June, when there was then an announcement simply because Biomarin had said that they, having heard nothing, would have to withdraw the drug. Going to the NICE interim guidance released 2 weeks ago. I will give way.
Gracie Malonu in my seat. Fortunately, being in Wales, she will get the drug until October, but there's still that cut-off point. Is he amazed, as I was, that there was that total lack of engagement, even when that offer was put forward?
Mulholland.
I think it's absolutely disgraceful, and something that I would urge the Minister to properly take up, because we haven't had answers or justifications, and there can be no justification for NHS England to behave in that way. So in terms of the NICE decision, this has been deemed already to have been flawed by those involved, including the MPS Society, including conditions, because the NICE recommendation saying that they, in the short term, do not recommend approving Vimizim is wrong, because it fails to consider Biomarin's offer and has assumed the cost of the drug will be the original $395,000. So how is that possibly come to be. NICE also took months to put together the interim guidance, but have only given until next Tuesday to receive the extra evidence they've asked for. Surely an unfair timeline for people to respond. Furthermore, on the 28th of April 2015, which incidentally is a year from Vimizim being approved by the European Medicines Agency, meaning the drug is approved in 20 other European countries, including France, Germany, the Czech Republic, yet it's still not available in the UK because NHS England have failed to put in arrangements for funding it. And does the Minister not agree and share a sense of frustration, indeed anger and disbelief that the NHS are refusing to fund this drug when so many other of our neighbours are? And then more fundamentally, Earl Howe gave an assurance to patients that their access to the drugs they need would not depend on the cost per QALY measure. And yet, can the Minister tell us why his department has gone back on that assurance? Because that's exactly what they appear to have done. Now, I have to remind the Minister, and I do appreciate the time that he's put in to meet with us, but the 11-page letter that he asked the organisations to send to him some 11 weeks ago, we were expecting him to respond to that because it was a complaint about NHS England's handling of this. And yet I have to say, with respect to him, that he simply passed that on to NHS England to respond to us themselves. That's not what we asked him to do. The response itself does not address the points that we made to him, with him, at his request, about the way NHS England have failed people. So can I ask him again to reply directly, properly, and to investigate the mishandling of this by NHS England. Turning to the mutation of those with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, already been mentioned, and again I highlight the campaigning of organisations like Muscular Dystrophy UK, Joining Jack, Action Duchenne, the Duchenne Family Support Group, the Duchenne Children's Trust, Alex Wish and the Harrison's Fund. Again, they share the frustration that the MPS Society have over this process. As many honourable members know, Duchenne muscular dystrophy is a condition affecting only boys, and a number of potential treatments are in a late clinical trial, and it is Translarna, particularly, that's received conditional approval funding in the EU in August 2014. We have a situation where this clearly effective drug, Translarna, is being funded in a number of countries, including Greece, with their economic situation, and yet we are still not any closer to hearing that it will be funded, and I hope that we will hear positive news on that today. And then turning to tuberous sclerosis. Again, I want to pay tribute to the Tuberous Sclerosis Association and working with Jane Spink and her colleagues. And for those who don't know, tuberous sclerosis is a condition that causes the growth of tumours in organs, including the brain, eyes, heart, kidneys, skin, and lungs. And that can result in a range of associated health problems, including epilepsy, learning difficulties, behavioural problems. And again, another drug, everolimus, has been shown to be effective at shrinking these tumours, extending life and improving quality of life. But despite being licensed for use in patients with TSC in February 2013, NHS England has failed to draw up a prescribing policy. I'll just say that at least 2 people have already died since the drug was licensed. Chris Kingswood, a consultant nephrologist, said Julie Brooker's death in January 2013 was absolutely preventable if she had been given access to everolimus. We'll give way.
Thank you. Just to say, my constituent William needs this drug. And the thing for them is what you alluded to before. It's the timeline. They've waited 2 years. They are being told maybe it's another year. But what they're saying to me is maybe William doesn't have that time. And maybe William will be, like the girl you've just said, no longer with them. Those parents are fighting for their son.
I thank the Honourable Lady for giving way. And she's right, none of these children and their families have time. And in all these conditions, they will deteriorate. And that deterioration cannot then be reversed. And she's right, it's been 28 months since it was approved. And yet we're getting no closer to patients being able to to access it. Can the Minister tell us what he will do to speed up a commissioning policy for everolimus? And then I want to turn to one more condition to mention it, which has already been mentioned today, which is Batten disease. And I want to pay tribute to the Batten Disease Family Association. Batten disease was a condition, another condition that I had not heard of until I was approached by my constituents Duncan and Lindsay Brown-Nutt. And I've been really pleased to join Duncan to support some of his amazing fundraising efforts. And he, in the summer, with Rod Holt, his cousin, is off to do a wonderful cycle to the Arctic Circle, something to raise money. But the day after the general election, his daughter, 6-year-old Ellie May, passed away from Batten disease. And Batten disease is another condition currently without any cure being prescribed. It's a condition that includes an increasing visual impairment, complex epilepsy, severe seizures, the decline of speech, language and swallowing skills, and deterioration of motor skills that result in the loss of mobility and ultimately death. And again, the potential for treatment for Batten disease is not even in the consideration for the 25th of June. So if the other conditions are still unclear and may have their drugs turned down, then when are we going to see real action on treatment for Batten disease? I will give way.
Can I just point out that biomarine pharmaceuticals are also developing a cure for Batten disease? Well, not a cure, but at least to alleviate some of the symptoms.
I thank the Honourable Lady for giving way. I had a meeting with the Batten Disease Family Association, and they explained that to me. But unfortunately, that's not even in the consideration for the 25th of June. And this is why we do need this overhaul. Because the reality is, and I do say this to the Minister, and I ask him, we have a 5-year Parliament, I hope he will serve as the Life Sciences Minister for a considerable time, if not for that whole Parliament. And as well as doing something to deal with the accountability deficit that I'm afraid we do very clearly now have in the NHS when it comes to the decision-making of NHS England. I also say to him that a challenge to him as the Life Science Minister must now be to lead a process, to put in place a proper process for approval for drugs for rare conditions. Of course, there is a cost implication. Of course, these drugs have to be effective, but we have a situation here with drugs that are effective that this country is not currently funding when other countries, even countries with less strong economies, are finding the money in their health services to fund. I will give way for one last time.
The Honourable Gentleman giving way is very generous. He talks about funding, but one aspect that goes before funding is making people aware of these diseases. For example, the government has a Be Clear on Cancer campaign, but it doesn't take into account rare conditions and rare cancers like neuroblastoma, which is what my constituency is suffering from and is near death on this case. So we need to get the government to look at ensuring that rare conditions are part of that bigger campaign to ensure that they get the help they need as well.
Greg Mulholland.
Well, I thank the Honourable Gentleman for that. And he's right, and I'm afraid to say that politically, particularly to election time, there is perhaps not enough focus on some of these rare conditions and too much focus on conditions that then are seen to appeal to a broader group of people. And we cannot allow that to lead to the discrimination against people with ultra-rare conditions that clearly there are. And I will just finish by quoting two things to the Minister and to honourable members. The first is clearly in the framework agreement with NHS England. It clearly lays out the fact that he can and the Secretary of State can and should intervene, because it says in paragraph 4.11.13, if the Secretary of State considers that NHS England is significantly failing in its duties and functions, he is able to intervene and issue directions to NHS England. This also applies where he or she considers NHS England has failed to act in the interests of the health service. Well, very clearly that's what NHS England have done, and he must now act and really get a grip of this process. But I want to leave the final word to Katie Brown, the amazingly courageous mother of 6-year-old Sam, because you can imagine the devastation that she felt after the NICE decision, then flawed NICE decision to recommend not approving this drug for the time being, knowing full well that NHS England will just use that as their cue to say no on or before the 25th of June. She has said, if that is the case, that Sam is being handed a death sentence. He is being denied his freedom, his independence, and his future. That's not something that any of us should stand by and allow when we have a drug that is affordable, if we have a system that allows it to be the way other European nations are, and a drug that is clearly clinically effective. So we need major change, and, Minister, we need it quickly.
The question is that this House has considered access to drugs for ultra-rare diseases. Caroline Noakes.
To serve under your chairmanship. I would like to be first to congratulate the Honourable Member for Leeds North West on having secured this really important debate, and to pay tribute to the enormous amount of work he's done on Morquio syndrome, which he's raised many times both in the House and in this chamber, and he has held numerous meetings and led delegations to Downing Street. He's worked assiduously on behalf of his constituent Sam Brown, but not just on Morquio, as we've heard this afternoon, on a range of ultra-rare diseases, and he's done an excellent job this afternoon on highlighting the problems, the delays in funding, and the amount of time it's taken simply to get these drugs through the approval process. I wish, rather than to focus on those aspects, to merely talk about the human cost, and particularly to highlight the case of my constituent, Jagger Curtis, who is just 7 years old. He's going to be 8 this August, and a pupil at Romsey Abbey Primary School in my constituency. He was one of the brave boys who last Wednesday walked up Downing Street to hand deliver his letter to the Prime Minister. And it was an incredible experience for him and his parents to be able to do that. A really important part of their campaign to highlight the need for funding and approval for Translana, because Jagger suffers from Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. Translana is, of course, a relatively new drug, and I say relatively because, of course, it's been used in European countries since last year. It got its conditional approval from the European Commission in August last year, and yet here in the UK we are, as the Honourable Gentleman has mentioned, still waiting. Duchenne muscular dystrophy is a very serious condition which affects about 2,500 people in the UK, almost all of them boys. It causes muscle weakness, leading to a dramatic loss of muscle function, and patients will typically lose the ability to walk in their early teens. They'll require respiratory support by their mid-teens, and they're likely to die either of heart failure or respiratory failure before they reach 30. I can't emphasise enough what an absolutely devastating condition it is, and how very brave those families are when they have to face up to and deal with the reality of a Duchenne diagnosis. Currently, the only treatments available address the symptoms rather than the cause, and they include things like being prescribed steroids, which of course have some very severe side effects and can lead to sudden and dramatic weight gain, to mood swings, which particularly in teenage boys can be really difficult to contend with, and thinning bones. It is, as has been heard this afternoon, a rare condition with very few sufferers in the UK, and only about 10 to 15% of the sufferers have what they refer to as the nonsense mutation, which is what makes them eligible for this drug Translana. Now, in some respects, Jagger is very lucky. He is one of the boys who has the nonsense mutation, and he is eligible for Translana. And currently, he is still mobile, and that's absolutely critically important when we're considering this drug, because you cannot be prescribed it after the mobility has been lost. It has the best chance of having a beneficial effect whilst the boys can still move around. Once they have lost their ambulation, it is too late. The opportunity has been missed. In the case of Jagger, his parents were told that he was a suitable candidate for Translana late last year, and Julie and James genuinely believed that they were within a few weeks of going to the hospital and picking up a prescription for a drug, the one drug that they had been told could make a difference to their son. They had no idea in November last year that they would still be waiting for it now, and that it still wouldn't have finished going through the administrative process by the end of June. We're 7 months on from the day when they were expecting to go and pick up a prescription, but still they don't have a decision and they simply don't know what the outcome is going to be. During that time, of course, they have watched their son lose some of his mobility. His muscles have wasted away further. And what they desperately want more than anything else is an extension of that period of time that Jagger is able to move around by himself without the need for a wheelchair. Jagger, in his letter to the Prime Minister last week, wrote how he wanted to keep on playing football forever, just like his friends. He's an enormous Saints fan, and one of his proudest moments was going onto the pitch at St Mary's, leading the team out, and there's a fantastic photograph that he included in his letter to the Prime Minister, which shows him shaking hands with Ronald Koeman, the manager of the team. In every other way, Jagger is a lively, lovely, normal little boy with a massive, massive love for football. But, and it's a huge but, unlike most 7-year-olds, Jagger has already been fitted for a wheelchair. His parents have had to go through the necessary preparations, heartbreaking, really difficult, but they have had to do that to make sure that when Jagger's mobility is more restricted, he will have a wheelchair that is ready and waiting for him so he can still get around. So, for Jagger and for every other boy with Duchenne muscular dystrophy who has the nonsense mutation, the clock is ticking. And the clock has been ticking since last August, when the parents had their hopes raised that there was a treatment that was about to come onto the market and be available. And this treatment could give boys like Jagger the chance to see out their time at primary school without the need for a wheelchair. So as he puts it, he can run around with his friends and be like any other normal little boy. My honourable friend, the member for Leeds North West, I should refer to him as the honourable gentleman now, but old habits die hard. And actually on this subject, he has been a great friend and campaigner on this issue, and I pay tribute to that. And he and Muscular Dystrophy UK and Action Duchenne have done great work highlighting the problems that have been faced in getting Translana approval in the UK. We are expecting a decision at the end of June, and the company who manufacture it, PTC Therapeutics, indicated last week that they were ready to go, that they had the availability of stocks and they would be able to supply it as and when needed. If that drug is given the green light at the end of June, it will be distributed here. But these boys have already waited for far too long, and this drug is the only one that is giving them any hope. I know that the Minister has been most diligent for some months, listening to all we have had to say in this chamber, in the House, on Twitter, and indeed in the media. There are very real concerns, as we've heard, about how long the process has taken, how complicated it has been, and some of the inconsistencies and contradictions about when this might be available. I hope the Minister will want to make some comment on that. But I'm very conscious there are many members here this afternoon who undoubtedly will want to contribute, so I've deliberately kept this very short, but I would like to conclude with the words of Jules Geary, because I simply do not think you can summarise any better how this particular family feels. It is hard enough watching your child have to go through losing their muscles. For the drug to work, Jagger still needs to be mobile, so we simply don't have time to wait. We have been given hope through this drug. We just can't let it be taken away again.
Jim Shannon.
First of all, I congratulate the Honourable Member for Leeds North West in bringing this to Westminster Hall for consideration. The reason the hall is well filled is because we're all here and we have constituents who are suffering, who don't have access to the drugs that are needed for the rare diseases. And I congratulate the Honourable Member as well on his hard work that he's done. He's well renowned for this. We've all said that, but it's the truth, and we want him to know that as well. I'm glad this debate has occurred because it's one that reflects many people in my constituency. We've heard some of the stories. We'll hear more before this debate's over. Rare diseases may hold the name rare, but collectively affect the lives of 3 million people across the United Kingdom, emphasising that all must be done to create a comprehensive initiative for providing care to those affected by these difficult and challenging diseases. The rare diseases tend to be life-threatening or chronically debilitating. There are between 6,000 and 8,000 rare diseases. Each one affects less than 0.1% of the UK's population, with Rare Disease UK calculating that 75% of these illnesses affect children. So the reason why we're here today is on behalf of our constituents, but very much focusing upon those young people across the whole of the United Kingdom, of Great Britain and Northern Ireland that have these problems. The ultra-rare diseases have been mentioned, the Mulholland disease, Duchenne muscular dystrophy, tuberous sclerosis, and I'll add one to that if I could, the Prader-Willi syndrome as well. It's a problem that we have. Some of my constituents suffer from it, and I want to put it on the Hansard record as well. The chances of improving quality of life are very much dependent on a narrow time scale requiring quick responses in diagnosis and treatment and drug provision. So drugs can be accessed when they are proven to be most effective. In other words, time is of the essence, and every member who has spoken so far has said that. So quite clearly, the issues for the people who are suffering are now, not on a 6-month scale or a 12-month scale in the future. It's our duty to make this timeline as transparent and as effective as possible within the finite resources that we have. And I understand the problems that the Minister has in particular. There must be adequate assistance for practitioners to be able to diagnose as quick as possible and to allow for a timely diagnosis in combination with timeliness and drug and treatment provision and sufficient funding UK-wide. I'm quite happy to get wide.
For giving way that point, and he also has been very consistent on this position. He's absolutely right. One of the things we found in the Mulholland District Group is that one of the main reasons why there's delays is that clinicians, particularly GP levels, don't say these diseases very often, and when they do, they're sometimes lost as to where to go. But surely the whole point of this is, once it's been diagnosed, the people suffering from those diseases should have no better or no worse access than somebody with a much more common disease. Surely that is the issue that's got to be addressed. Once this is identified, we've got to get to grips and get the medication, whatever support's needed, so these people can get on and live the best life they possibly can.
I agree wholeheartedly with the Honourable Gentleman and what he has said, and I'm sure the Minister in his response has heard the comments from each one of us, which says time is of the essence, let's strike now and let's do it right away, and that's what we're about. In equal measure, health and social care professionals involved in the diagnosis, the treatment and the care of these patients face difficult tasks. There must be, and I believe there has to be, adequate assistance for practitioners to be able to diagnose as quick as possible, to allow for the timely diagnosis in combination with timeliness and drug and treatment provision and sufficient UK-wide funding as well. And I'd like to maybe, I know the Minister and I have spoken about this before in the German debates and other debates as well, and I've always referred to Queen's University in Belfast and the importance of research and development. And Queen's University is one of those universities that do that, and they work in conjunction with the Health Department. So maybe the Minister could give us some idea what the government is doing in relation to research and development and ensuring that new drugs are found for the purposes of health and care. Yes, quite happy to give way.
Thank you, Member, for giving way. And the point that he raised on research, as he will know that I'm involved in one of the campaigns in Northern Ireland, and in fact right across the United Kingdom, for complex regional pain syndrome, which affects children but also mostly affects people from the age of 50 on, and they can lose limbs through it. About 1 in every 3,000 people are affected. Research, we need to have more research for this in order to find the drug that will cure it. There's many lives being destroyed, and in the research, funding needs to be put in place to get research done.
I thank my honourable friend and colleague for his intervention, and quite clearly the message is there. It's one that I believe in as well, and I'm sure the Minister will respond to that very, very positively. And in light of all the statistics that we've heard today, we feel we must move ourselves to imagine a situation where someone in our lives are outside of that there, and we've had examples of that there, and the emotional strain it puts upon people and upon families. Only 35% of patients were aware of a licensed treatment for their condition. There's something wrong when that's the case. How come only 35% of the people actually know there's something there for them? How is government and the Minister addressing that? I'm not trying to attack the Minister. Don't ever think that's not how I work. But I'd like just to ask him the questions which are very clear in my mind, and that is, how do we move this forward in a positive fashion? Of those 35%, 89% of those had been able to access the treatment, but 11% hadn't. So quite clearly, 65% aren't able to get the drugs, and then of the 35%, only a small proportion, a small proportion of those weren't able to get the drugs either. I just want to very quickly touch upon Duchenne muscular dystrophy, if I can, as others have. Which, if the Translarna was given at the correct time, then we could prolong the mobility of the sufferer. And my constituents and their children deserve to have access to that drugs as soon as possible. And I think that's one of the things that I would like to see happening. The effects of long waiting times and certainly is much more widespread, and while ultra-rare diseases may affect the few, to those who suffer, the effects are an inescapable reality and should be taken with utmost seriousness. Families deserve a solution to continual failure to establish a lawful, robust and transparent commissioning service that enables new drugs for the rare disease community to have access in an equitable and timely manner to avoid situations such as what we've spoken about, where the crucial windows of opportunity pass, which everyone has referred to. This, I believe, Mr Crosbie, is a crisis. It can't be underlined as anything else. The people are in trouble and they need our help now. Can I just very quickly pay tribute to the lady who looks after the Northern Ireland Rare Diseases Forum and Society, Christine Collins. We had a meeting last year with the Health Minister, Jane Ellison, and to discuss this matter. And very clearly we were moving forward, and the Minister was very responsive. And I just want to say, in the background information that we had, in November 2013, the UK Department of Health and the devolved governments published the UK Strategy for Rare Diseases. And then in June 14, the Northern Ireland Assembly again endorsed that and very clearly ensured that there was an understanding and a commitment to that. The meeting we had with the Minister earlier this year, or last year it was, I should say, we had an opportunity to reinforce that. So maybe the Minister can give us some idea what discussions he has had directly with his fellow Minister to move this forward in a way that we can deliver the commitment that we need. I referred to the research, and I think that's very important. I haven't spoken broadly, and to conclude, Mr Crosbie, because I'm conscious of other members who want to speak as well. The topic of today's debate is access to drugs. It's also an opportunity to bring out gaps in the patient experience, because let's remember the patients, let's remember the families, let's remember the children, let's remember all those people who suffer as well, that require a coordinated response not only between the health services and social services, but also between, sorry about this here, I thought I'd turn this off. Between the patient experience that require a coordinated response not only between the health services and social services, but also between research bodies and the relevant charities. I would hope that the shared experiences we have brought forward in this debate signal the urgency of access to these vital treatments. I remind all those in a position to make a tangible impact on the process of drug access that the moments we spend debating these issues, somebody else falls into the trap, unfortunately, who will not be able to access the drugs. I'd urge the Minister to respond in a very positive fashion, and I thank the member again for giving us all a chance to speak on this. Thank you.
I intend to call the three front benches at 15:30. I see there are two members standing. Is Andrea Jenkins? Are you standing? There are three members standing, so if members can keep their contributions to kind of less than 4 minutes, you'll all get in. Cheryl Gillam.
Mr Crosbie. Can I again pay tribute to the honourable member who has raised this debate and to the work that he has done, which has been untiring. And can I say that I agree with my two colleagues that have spoken prior to me and made many of the points that I would have hoped to have made in my own contribution. But I'm grateful to have a short time just to raise the issue of my constituent Archie Hill and the tireless campaigning of his family to get access to Translana for their son. It is quite inspirational to see the way in which this family and many others have campaigned for their children. And I cannot imagine anything worse than watching your child slowly lose its mobility, knowing in any case that the life expectancy is not going to be as great as maybe it is for you and me, Mr Crosbie. And for me, to know that this drug is available in other European countries, we've heard about its availability, for example, in Greece, that is not in the best economic health, but only just recently, Germany and the German Federal Joint Committee has said that this drug they determined that this drug provides a benefit for ambulatory patients aged 5 years and above and older with this nonsense mutation. And I think seeing the rise in PTC therapies share price on the back of that announcement must show that this company is well placed and its drug is being recognised right around the world. For me, there is an irony to this, because if this decision that is coming down the track is against making Translana available for these patients that deserve it so much, the question is always going to arise, is it over cost? And it will almost definitely be on a cost basis. And yet, day by day, I see millions being spent on HS2. in my own constituency when we can't spend 150,000 to keep a 10-year-old boy ambulatory and enjoying his life. You do have to question where the priorities are for government when you're actually faced with the people in front of you and you look at these pie-in-the-sky projects that sometimes governments of all complexions choose to follow. But the one point that I really wanted to make is that if the decision goes against providing this drug and bearing in mind the failed processes that it has gone through, I think the government has a golden opportunity to rescue this dish from the fire. I don't think it is necessarily going to fall out of the frying pan. On July the 8th, the Chancellor of the Exchequer is going to be delivering his emergency budget. And we have before created a cancer drugs fund, so expensive drugs could be available to save lives right across the country. And so I would ask the Minister if he will have conversations with the Treasury and see whether his right honourable friend, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, on July the 8th, could announce an access fund for drugs for rare conditions. And presuming that Translana is one of those drugs that will be on that list, that would mean it would be available in time for Archie Hill and for the other children that we've heard about today. For me, the awful thing is that time is running out. And if we let time run out for these children, I do not think that it is a mark of a civilised government when it is a small cost compared to some of the other expenditures that governments make.
Thank you, Mr. Crosby. I'd like to lend my words of congratulations to the Honourable Member for Leeds North West for tabling this debate. His passion and commitment on the subject is, frankly, second to very few. Last week I met with an incredibly impressive constituent in Bath. Her name is Sarah Long, and many honourable members will know of her through the Twitter debate yesterday. And she met with me to discuss the benefits she received from Vizism, the enzyme replacement therapy to address the cause of Mulholland A. She is estimated to be just one of 88 people in the UK to need this drug. And whilst on Vimizim, she's expected to experience a number of dramatic changes which have gradually become far more apparent. She told me that since being on the drug, the ability to use her lungs have transformed, and she needed almost constant access to oxygen before she started treatment. And today, as a result of that treatment, she just needs 4 hours of nebulizing. Pre-Vimizim, Farah found it pretty difficult to talk. And Vimizim has given her that voice back. The fear of a return to those days are obviously filling her with current dread. Following recent conversations with the MPS, NICE announced on the 4th of June that they're currently leaning towards not recommending Vimizim for treating people with MPS IVA Mulholland. While this is only a preliminary recommendation and is not a final guidance, and their decision may change after consultation, I very much hope that in the interest of the constituent's case, this decision may change. I would like to request that my honourable friend, the Minister, leans on NHS England heavily before the 25th of June, as they make a decision to reimburse Vimizim on an interim basis whilst NICE completes their decision-making. The 25th of June is absolutely critical, as everyone has said today. If NHS England announces a positive decision, then all those who want treatment, who meet the criteria, will be allowed access to treatment regardless of whether they were on the clinical trial or not. If NHS England follow NICE's current position and the decision is negative, then Biomarin will be withdrawing compassionate use immediately to those in England currently receiving treatment. As we know, MPS can lead to reduced life expectancy. However, Sarah is now in her 40s, and we've heard an awful lot so far from other members in relation to different treatments supporting young people, but actually it also supports the adults as well who have managed to get to that age. If NICE gathered more evidence from people like Sarah, the Minister would see that Vimizim has worked for Sarah and others around the country. The real injustice is that her quality of life has dramatically improved, and it appears NICE are unable to peer review it, given the lack of cases. I hope the Minister will be able to look into this particular Catch-22 case. For my constituent, being on the drug means that the cost of her care has been dramatically reduced as the amount of time on oxygen has also fallen. This is also an obvious cost reduction to the taxpayer. NICE clearly need to acknowledge that the significance of clinical expertise in their process and address in their processes and address their current expertise shortfalls to stop two other constituents with a rare disease having to suffer the same problems. However, if a further extension to Vimizim is granted, this must be available to all ages and not just children. While I'm delighted the government has published its strategy for rare diseases, the strategy is as good as its implementation. The strategy highlights a commitment to protecting patients with rare diseases and emphasises the needs to improve and deliver effective interventions quickly, equitably and sustainably. I hope this strategy will stand my constituent in a good place. I'm pleased to see the government is leading the way on scientific and pharmaceutical research. However, what good are they if they don't obviously make it into the hands of those that need them the most? While the government has produced an excellent strategy on rare diseases, would my honourable friend provide the House with an update on ultra-rare disease strategy? Given the urgency of this matter, if the Minister has time to meet with my constituent in the coming days, I'd be most grateful.
Andrea Jenkins.
Firstly, I'd like to thank and commend the Honourable Gentleman Greg Mulholland for his work in this area. What I find very heartbreaking is that here today we're hearing of a lot of our constituents who have had access to drugs, and so there's real hope for them. Their lives have changed for the better, and that's been taken away. My Honourable Gentleman Greg Mulholland, I've also got a constituent who's suffering from Morchio, Angela Patton, and at 35 years old, it's taken her 35 years to find a drug that works, and now this is taken away from her. Same as I've got Matthew Firth, a constituent, a young man with special needs who can no longer get access to a cream that he needs, a basic cream. Now, I would like to draw to attention to the case of Abby Longfellow, which is very much in the news at the moment. It's a 12-year-old girl who's got dense deposit disease. She's got a rare form of this, and she needs a transplant, a kidney transplant, to be able to live. Her father has been prepared over the last 12 months to give her a transplant of his kidney. Now, he should have had this operation last Friday, but in order for this to go ahead, she needs this particular drug, ecoclizumab. Now, research in the UK says, NHS England and NICE says that it won't work in Abby's case, but there's research out there from the US. Abby has a very rare form of DDD, and there's research from the US, from Canada, from Italy, and that it does in fact work. Now, I'd like to first of all thank David Cameron, the Prime Minister, for actually intervening and ask NHS England to look at this. But if I could really urge the Minister to ensure that this does happen, because there's research out there, and what I find quite difficult to understand is it just a tick box exercise for the likes of NHS England and NICE to say, look, that it won't actually work, or do they actually look at research beyond this country? I think it's important we look at this. So I'd personally like to see a joined-up approach between NICE, NHS England and Department of Health. And if I'd request it, if the Minister could look comprehensively to ensure that NHS England and NICE do look into this for me, please. Thank you.
I'm going to call the front benches. There may be a vote in between, in which case I'll suspend for 15 minutes. At the end, the new rules allow Mr Mulholland to wind up for a short period, if there's time. But in order for the Minister to allow the time at the end, you will have to give the Minister time in between. So I'm going to call the SNP spokesman, Dr Philippa Whitford.
Well, as a breast cancer surgeon for over 30 years, I've been in this position with my patients, often with new cancer drugs. Obviously, we got turned down for Kadcyla just earlier this year. And often in the cases of cancer, it's end-of-life research that will later translate to early treatment research. So people read in the paper, oh, £90,000 for 6 months of life, that doesn't make sense. But inevitably, these drugs move forward. It strikes me, listening to the people who have spoken this afternoon, obviously we have a different system in Scotland, and what strikes me is what is required is a system that's open, that can be approached, and actually looks from all angles. Now, we have the SMC in Scotland, Scottish Medical Consortium, who look at drugs in the same way that NICE do, and they do look at worldwide evidence. And they will work up a drug in detail. The balance for us seems to be slightly more on effectiveness than cost, although obviously cost is part of it. Our impression is that NICE is sometimes that cost would be a bigger component of that. But they are both looking at cost effectiveness. And we all know there isn't an infinite pot of money. What has changed in our system over the last year is that we have combined our cancer drugs fund with our rare diseases drug fund and simply called it the new drugs fund. They have quadrupled the amount that's in it from 20 million to 80 million. And that means that in any one year it's a little bit more flexible whether the demand is towards rare diseases or towards a new cancer drug. With NICE only assessing 3 drugs a year, the rare drugs are never going to get that workup, and they therefore need to have a separate system. And in Scotland, we have a rare diseases and an ultra-rare diseases pathway that they follow. The biggest change that's come in Scotland in the last year is what's called PACE, Patient and Clinician Evaluation. And therefore, if the evidence for a drug is so strong that it's going to go through in the nod and it isn't an issue, that's fine. PACE is not engendered. But if it looks like it's more finely balanced or it isn't going to go through, patient groups or the drug companies can request a PACE assessment. And that will involve expert clinicians, it will involve patients, and it will involve patient groups. And that means that you can get slightly outside the numbers and talk about the change in life, and talk about quality of life, and talk about money saved in other aspects of the NHS that maybe doesn't appear in a research paper. And I think that that's what you require, is a system. And it has to be fair, and in the end of the day, it will not always produce the result you want for every single person, for every single new drug that comes out in the world. But it has to be fair. It can't be that something is not looked in a proper way, or even that the individual requests are being used as the main way of accessing a drug. That's meant to be a transition. It's meant to be something that supports these young people who've been in a trial, and while we're getting through the paperwork to it being accepted, you have this access on a compassionate basis for individuals. It can't be left as the main method.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving way, and that sounds like an excellent system, and I'd like to commend the Scottish Government on their work, because that could be a great help to my constituent, Mr Tristan James, who suffers from tuberous sclerosis complex. Very reliant on a clinical trial drug to deal with a tumour, a life-threatening tumour that he has. But that means, of course, that drug prescription for him is completely at the discretion of the drugs company, and his family are going from prescription to prescription, alluding to the point that my honourable friend made here about the emotional pressure on families. I commend the Scottish Government for their work.
Thank you. I think the important thing is, if this is all done by individual requests, then what the NHS doesn't do is go to these companies. And we do need to realise that often decades of investment they have made, and 9 out of the 10 drugs they research will go nowhere. But it is important that you have a wider debate with those companies to get the best price. And as obviously was commented earlier, some of these companies are willing and able to reduce the price to get it in here. These drugs are licensed. We mustn't mix up licensing with funding. Licensing is this drug safe, and is it proven at a basic level? Not just anyone coming in and going, rare plant juice will cure everything. So these are licensed drugs which we could actually prescribe. A doctor has the right to prescribe, but the NHS has to make the decision whether they will fund. So these are funding decisions and not licensing decisions. And I think it is important, as I say, that families know, that when their clinician takes it forward, what is the pathway? How is it you move forward? And that they can respect decisions that are made, that they know how to lobby at the next step, and that they feel their voice has been listened to. And that's what we feel over the last more than a year that PACE has allowed us, because clinicians got very frustrated in Scotland that often these things were going through and we weren't getting to inform it. So I think having a system which sits on the side of NICE or is a subgroup, but you're never going to have that an entire one of the 3 NICE assessments is given over to 88 patients when they're trying to assess drugs that might be taken by 500,000 people. And that would mean the rare diseases would always fall. So I think you have to have its own system. You have to have that the patient voice is heard in these ways. And I would commend that the Minister, obviously things have changed with the Health and Social Care Act. I would commend that looking at a structure. Sorry.
I thank the honourable member for giving way in what is a very thoughtful contribution. Would she agree that it would be worth all of the administrations on these islands who together form the British-Irish Council maybe collaborating on these issues, maybe particularly borrowing from the very good example that is being developed in Scotland, and maybe seeing where that's an area which there can be common achievement, common advance, and perhaps even creating some common funding stream, as well as the discrete funds that she has talked about?
Well, I think obviously devolution gave us the power to do things differently, but I don't think we should then reinvent the wheel. Often if NICE has done work, we will either accept that or we will have a quick re-evaluation to see if it should be different, how things are applied here. But we don't just go back to the beginning. But I am sure that there are ideas that can be shared in both directions. But it looks as if these diseases got truly left as orphan, or these drugs truly got left as orphan, when the system changed. And we know with tuberous sclerosis, which you referred to, that patients who have the brain tumour can access it through the Cancer Drugs Fund, but if they have a kidney tumour and are treated by urologists, they're not part of that system and they simply won't be aware of it. And that kind of random unfairness is...
Just to say this, Mr. Crosby, that there really is a forum in place that's driven by the Health Minister here that associates and discusses matters with the 3 regions. They come together. There is a UK-wide strategy already in place, so the process is there for that to happen already. The fact that it hasn't happened yet is what the delay is, and that's our concern.
Yeah, I think though it is the matter of actually what ideas go on the table. You know, what is it that they are actually discussing in the meetings? And I think that there are good ideas that are going ahead. But I would commend the idea of including patients and clinicians in evaluations of this, because the numerate data will often be small, the trials will be small by the nature of the diseases, and you have to look wider. And the problem, obviously, for children is if these drugs are to prevent deformity, then they have to be got in early. And obviously, the people that you're talking about with Morchio already have the changes. What we don't know yet, following on from metastatic breast cancer treatments that eventually become adjuvant treatments, is if these treatments were given earlier, how much of the change could you prevent? And how much saving could you get on the disability of that person in the long term? So I would commend looking at that. I know it is difficult and I know it is challenging, but it's clearly a system that is fair, that has an interim for compassionate reasons, but that then people can see where their voice should go. Thank you.
Luciana Berger.
Thank you, Mr. Crosby. It is, as ever, a pleasure to be called to speak under your chairmanship this afternoon. I also commend the Honourable Member for Leeds North West for securing this extremely important debate on the access to medicines for ultra-rare diseases, and for his contribution to the debate this afternoon. This is an issue that he has doggedly pursued through debates and questions, and it's right that he's had the time to bring these matters to the attention of the government today. I also commend the UK Parliament outreach team for hosting the online debate on this issue yesterday on Twitter, using the hashtag #RDDebate. It's extremely valuable that the public have had an opportunity to contribute to and inform this debate, and I'm aware that many are watching us this afternoon. I also welcome the Minister back to his place. When viewed collectively, it is more than apparent that rare diseases are simply not that rare. 1 in 17 people will be affected by a rare disease at some point in their life, which means that around 3.5 million people in the UK have a rare disease. 75% of rare diseases affect children, and almost 1 in 3 diseases will see their patients tragically die before their 5th birthday. These really are sobering statistics, and it's clear that more must be done. In June 2009, the previous Labour government adopted the Council of the European Union's recommendation on action in the field of rare diseases. This recommended that member states should establish and implement plans or strategies for rare diseases. Following the work set out under the Labour government, the Coalition published the UK strategy in November 2013, and NHS England published their statement of intent with regard to the UK strategy in February of last year. Since then, we've also had the 5-year forward view, which reaffirms NHS England's commitment to achieving better outcomes for people with rare diseases. And while each of these publications is a step in the right direction, as I said already, and many have said already during the debate this afternoon, there's so much more that needs to be done. What has arisen from the health reforms of the Health and Social Care Act, introduced in 2012 under the Coalition, has seen patients and professionals left to navigate a labyrinth to access particular medicines, medicines which in many cases have already been approved and received licences. We've heard already this afternoon about tuberous sclerosis complex, TSC. It's a rare genetic condition which is estimated to affect 1 million people worldwide. And as we've heard, those with the condition develop non-cancerous tumours, often in the brain, eyes, heart, kidney, skin and lungs. Often TSC patients are at risk of complications, and surgical removal of the tumours is not always an option. This has a massive impact on a person's quality of life, and often it can be severe. We've heard as well this afternoon about the drug everolimus. It's been developed to treat some tumours associated with TSC, and it has been granted market authorisation by the European Medicines Agency. Yet despite it being licensed in the UK 28 months ago, it has not been appraised by NICE. It is currently only available through the NHS on an individual basis or through the Cancer Drugs Fund, resulting in significant inequalities in patient access. Another example we've heard throughout the course of this debate and on other occasions in recent weeks in the House is on Duchenne muscular dystrophy, which leaves many patients wheelchair dependent by the age of 12. As we've heard, the drug Translarna received conditional approval in the EU in August 2014 for the treatment of DMD. However, almost a year on, there are too many boys who could benefit that are still awaiting a decision on funding from NHS England. I'd like to take this opportunity to commend my honourable friend, the member for North Tyneside, who has done so much work to raise awareness of this issue on behalf of her constituents. And as we've heard from many members on all sides of this House, they also have constituents up and down this country who are affected. We heard a very passionate contribution from the honourable member for Romsey and Southampton North. Each day of delay sees the boys come closer to losing the ability to walk, by which point they would no longer be eligible for the drug. Countries across Europe have already seen the drug approved in their respective countries. The UK has taken a leading role in clinical trials for Translarna, but it is now lagging behind in the delivery of the drug to patients, and I hope the Minister will tell us why we have fallen so behind other European countries on this issue. I understand that NHS England are set to take a decision on funding shortly. We often hear that word, shortly, and I hope that the Minister again will provide us with a further update on this and actually clarify and qualify what shortly actually means. The current system in place to approve prescription is confusing and frankly chaotic. There are currently 7 pathways through which drugs for rare diseases can be evaluated and made available to patients. I'm not going to go through every one of them, but it's clear that there is no clarity in the decision-making process on which of these pathways a particular drug will be put through. In particular, this is due to a lack of clarity and transparency on the process, and information on how or why one medicine evaluation approach or access route is selected over another is simply not available. And I hope that the Minister in his reply can outline what steps the government will take in order to clarify this process, to speed up those decisions and also make them more open so patients can better understand the process. There are 2 specific pathways. I think there are some specific questions that, again, I hope the Minister will reply to and respond to, because there are significant concerns that they would potentially limit access to medicines for people with rare diseases. These are the 2 are the highly specialised technology evaluation programme, which is administered by NICE, and the evaluation through commissioning from NHS England. There are widely held concerns that the highly specialised technology evaluation programme, introduced following the Health and Social Care Act to appraise medicines for very rare diseases, has a process which is too opaque, and the topic selection process for this pathway is out of date. I hope the Minister will be able to reply and understand and explain whether he has any plans to work with NICE to update the selection and criteria for this pathway, as it currently does not take into account conditions defined by genetics, biomarkers, or differences in clinical presentations. I wonder whether the government will be able to let us know if they have any plans to increase the resources available to NICE to evaluate drugs through the highly specialised technology evaluation programme route, given that it is only resourced for 3 drug appraisals a year, despite the fact that the European Medicines Agency is licensing more than 4 times that amount. And finally, it's essential that patient groups have their input on the process by which the drugs upon which these patients rely are appraised. But a consultation on this programme has not yet been announced. I hope the Minister will be able to outline when he expects this to take place. Mr Crosbie, evaluation through commissioning is a specialised commissioning pathway in order to conduct pilots to collect data to inform the decision-making process on whether specialised commissioning proposals should be funded or not. It has been over a year since commissioning through evaluation was expanded, and it has been a few months since it was rebranded as evaluation through commissioning. Can the Minister please update members on the process and the progress of this process and has made for expanding patient access to drugs? As I understand it, there has been no medicine selected for the programme, and I wonder if the Minister can please tell us when he expects that to change. Can I also ask the Minister to update the House on the effectiveness of the early access to medicines scheme to date? With over 6,000 rare conditions, a specific disease could be described as rare, but having a rare disease is clearly anything but. Improving access to medicines and treatments for the 3.5 million people affected by rare diseases is crucial to improving their quality of life. Mr Crosbie, we've heard some very moving personal stories today from honourable members from all sides of the House during the course of this debate, and I was looking on Twitter to see some of the contributions that members of the public had made during the last 24 hours. And if I can just reflect on one contribution, one tweeter said in her contribution, if I could go on the Vimizim, I could start to work and pay taxes for others to get hold of the drugs that they need. That's just one contribution. There are obviously many that I'd ask the Minister to reflect on after this debate. There are so many issues that need addressing to improve the current system of medicine appraisals. We've touched on just a few today, and I hope the Minister will take on board what honourable members have said, and I look forward to his reply.
Minister George Freeman.
Thank you, Mr Crosbie. And could I start by just thanking Mr Speaker in the office for securing both this debate and allowing the Twitter debate, which I think has been a big step forward for public engagement. Could I start by thanking the honourable gentleman for bringing this to this forum this afternoon? And I suspect, Mr Deputy Speaker, in the 14 minutes I've got available, I'm not going to be able to answer every question. I've made a detailed log of them, and perhaps I can have permission to write to all those present in the debate with answers if I run out of time. I wanted to start by paying tribute to the parents and the patients, some of whom are here today, who I've got to know over the last few months. In particular, Sam Brown and his mother, Katie, Jagger Curtis, Archie Hill, and others have mentioned the MPS Society and Christine, and those many people in Action Duchenne and the Muscular Dystrophy UK group. This campaign, which raises some of the hardest issues at the heart of public health and the NHS, is one that you, with active representation across all parties in this House, are driving hard, and it's my job to respond as best I can and to try and put in place a policy landscape. But I pay tribute to your work in raising the very difficult issues which now need to be dealt with. I don't think anybody can fail but be moved by the situation that you and your children find yourselves in, and I wish, I can assure you as much as everybody in this room, that there was an easy solution. It is absolutely right that every child and every patient in this country should ask for and expect the very best from our NHS. It is equally true that as a taxpayer-funded, universal, free at the point of use, comprehensive health service, we simply cannot afford to provide every single treatment. And I'll say some more about some of the pressures on the system, particularly in the field of rare diseases. As a number of members have been kind enough to point out, since only taking this first Minister for Life Sciences office last year, this has been one of the issues on which I've worked most tirelessly. I had a number of meetings with the Honourable Member for Leeds North West and a number of the campaigners. Indeed, the Prime Minister and I have spent more time talking about this subject than any other in my first 9 months in office. And I continue to work with NHS England to encourage and help them develop a more appropriate mechanism, transparency and timeliness of their process in relation to all these specialist services. I've met with MPs across all houses, all sides of the House, patient groups, drug companies, and campaigners and children, and will continue to be happy to do so. The truth is, Mr. Deputy Speaker, these are some of the most complex and difficult decisions, life-changing decisions, that any department of government has to deal with. And I want to start, and I'll end by saying, it is in everybody's interests in this House that they're taken not by politicians, but by clinicians and by healthcare professionals whose professional job it is to make these decisions. Indeed, they do it every day of every week of every year for us, and I want to thank them for it. I want to, if I may, Mr. Deputy Speaker, say something about the context in which this challenge of rare disease is developing, something about what the government is doing, and something specifically about the timetable for these specific drugs that have been raised. And then, if I can, to deal with some of the questions. The truth is, we are at the forefront of an extraordinary revolution in biomedicine, which is going to increase and is increasing pressure on all healthcare systems across the developed world. There are currently 6,000 rare diseases, and it's estimated that 1 in 17 people will suffer from a rare disease at some point in our lives. In the UK, that means there are more than 3 million people with a rare disease, and the NHS is attempting to put in place a fair mechanism for dealing with their needs as best it can. Ultra-orphan definition has no formal or legal definition, but it's taken to mean affecting fewer than 500 people in England, and that's a prevalence of about 1 in 100,000 patients. Having come to this House after a career in biomedical research, I know well that this rare disease pressure is simply going to grow exponentially as the extraordinary advances in genomics and biomedical research mean that more and more diseases that we used to think of as a one-size-fits-all blockbuster are in fact discovered to be rarer diseases, requiring stratified, targeted and ultimately potentially personalised therapies. And I can assure the House it's something the Prime Minister, who has himself experienced firsthand the huge pain of rare disease in family, feels personally himself, and it's something we have devoted and continue to devote time to trying to tackle. Indeed, that is part of the reason he created the post of this new Minister for Life Sciences, and it's part of the remit I have in government to tackle some of these issues. Specifically on rare diseases, we are doing a number of important things. We've put £20 million into funding the National Institute for Health Research, Rare Diseases, Translational Research Collaboration, 900,000 in funding to support the work led by Public Health England to establish the UK Rare Diseases Register, and we're leading the work with other EU countries and key colleagues to develop a European reference network to support research. We've also launched the Precision Medicines Initiative and the Rare Disease Consortium, but we are going further, and central to this new mission of this new Ministry of Life Sciences, we are seeking to dramatically accelerate UK leadership in this field. That's why we've established Genomics England, the first nation on earth to seek to sequence the full genome of 100,000 NHS patients and to combine that with clinical data to form the world's first reference database for targeted and stratified diagnostics and treatments. It's why we've launched the Stratified Medicines Initiative. It's why I've launched the Early Access to Medicine scheme, and in answer to a number of colleagues' challenge to me as to whether we were getting a grip of this, it's why I've launched the Accelerated Access of Innovative Medicines and Technologies Review, which I can assure you has struck a chord around the world in terms of its scope. We are looking at NICE, we're looking at the regulator, and the vision of that review, and I've asked for first recommendations this autumn, is to look at this whole question of how we can dramatically accelerate the timeline for innovative medicines to come into our NHS, dramatically shorten the timeline for patients, and to unlock what is essentially the great win-win at the heart of our NHS, which is to use its research potential, its genomic and clinical informatics potential as the world's only integrated healthcare system to drive research into new drugs and to bring down the time and the cost of developing new drugs in order to allow us to get those drugs tested and developed here for the benefit of our patients and to make this country once again at the forefront of this revolution. We need to remember it costs typically £1 billion to £1.5 billion and takes 10 to 15 years to develop a new medicine. That is unsustainable for the industry, it's unsustainable for us. We cannot afford to pay the premium price at the end of patent life that industry requires, and we are in this country leading this global race in terms of putting in place a new landscape. The solution will not I fear, come in time to solve this particular funding issue this month, or even this quarter, or even this year. But we are making rapid progress, and I think we will look back with pride on this country's leadership in this field. Mr. Crosbie, NHS England have in place very carefully worked out decision-making processes for making drugs for rare diseases available to patients today, and I want to briefly outline how they work. Because of their rarity and the low patient population, services for rare conditions are commissioned nationally by NHS England as opposed to locally by clinical commissioning groups. These specialised services include 146 prescribed medical services set out in legislation. They account for approximately 14% of the total NHS budget. That's £14 billion a year, and it's worth remembering that just this one class, the Translarna drugs alone, at the price at which the system has to pay, we're talking hundreds of millions of pounds over the course of a lifetime, and we're going to have to reduce the cost of these drugs. We simply are not going to be able to afford to pay the price that's required by the companies for every single one of these new class that are coming on stream. The NHS England specialised commissioning process has been set out very carefully. It starts with one of the 68 clinical reference groups within NHS England creating a commissioning policy produced by clinicians and other medical professionals. That commissioning policy is referred to one of the care boards, then to a clinical panel. The clinical panel then assesses the draft policy against the known evidence with particular regard to clinical effectiveness and cost effectiveness, and the supported policies are passed on to the Clinical Priorities Advisory Group, CPAG. CPAG then assures that due process has been followed and makes a recommendation to the Specialist Commissioning Oversight Group, who consider the appropriateness and relative priority of new and existing treatments to patients. And final sign-off is by the Specialised Commissioning Committee, which is an NHS board subcommittee. NHS England's CPAG formulates recommendations on the basis of clinical advice, and I do want to stress to colleagues across all sides of the House that it is not in anybody's interests that ministers ever attempt to intervene in those clinical decisions. I want, Mr. Deputy Speaker, just to touch on the specific timetable for Translarna and Vimizim, which a number of colleagues have raised. On Translarna, NHS England's CPAG group developed the clinical commissioning policy for the treatment of this mutation. The policy was set out for consultation from 24th of March to the 23rd of April. The CPAG group is considering the draft commissioning policy today and tomorrow, and will be making a recommendation to the commissioning oversight group very shortly following that meeting. The Specialised Commissioning Oversight Group will consider those recommendations on the 24th of June and will make recommendations to the Specialist Commissioning Committee. They make recommendations on the 30th of June and will make a decision on whether to nationally commission Translarna until NICE releases its final guidance. Before PERDA, I was delighted to refer Translarna as a topic for evaluation by NICE's Highly Specialised Technologies programme. It's unfortunate that the general election fell right in the middle of this consultation process, which does explain some of the difficulty we had in dealing with the correspondence that the member for Leeds North West raised. Final guidance on Vimizim is expected in February 2016, draft guidance by the end of this year. For Vimizim, the process, just so that everybody is aware, again, Vimizim is being considered by CPAG today and tomorrow. A recommendation will go to the Oversight Group. It'll be considered on the 24th of June, and they'll make final recommendations again, which will be considered on the 30th of June. NICE's Highly Specialised Technologies programme will release final guidance on Vimizim in October 2015, and it's important to point out that NICE has not yet issued its final guidance on Vimizim to the National Health Service, and I encourage patients, the public, professionals and the manufacturer of Biomarin to engage with the ongoing consultation. Mr. Crosbie, I've got a number of questions here, and I have just under 120 seconds to answer them. I don't think it would be appropriate for me to try and spin through them all, and I will, if I, with your permission and colleagues' permission, write and give a detailed answer on all of them. I would simply pick up this point, which a number of honourable members across the House have asked. Is there not something we could do to raise more money quickly to purchase these drugs? I am in discussion with the Chancellor about this whole question of how we purchase specialist drugs and how we lay in place a landscape to make sure that we're not only bringing drugs more quickly through into the NHS and unlocking the power of the NHS as a research engine, but we are updating our commissioning structures. And the accelerated access review that I'm leading doesn't just look at how we light the runway in terms of regulation and NICE and MHRA's processes to bring drugs to proof of concept in the system quicker. It specifically looks at how we commission better. It looks also at the Cancer Drugs Fund, and I hear the comments from north of the border where I used to advise Scottish Enterprise on this whole field, and we will be looking at whether we might put in place some kind of rare disease, specialist drugs, innovative medicines fund to support some of that testing of medicines within the system in a research medicine setting, particularly in these rare diseases. In the next few years, Genomics England and our leadership of genomic insights into diagnostics and new drugs will bring on a whole range of new potential therapies. And we will need to make sure we have a landscape in England that's compatible with Scotland for testing those drugs, which may well mean that we won't be paying premium retail price to manufacturers at the end of a traditional phase 3-4 development process, but building a new model of commissioning which is based genuinely on evaluation, unlocking the power of the NHS as the world's greatest research engine.
Order, order.